What do we know about our rivers? We hope they are clean and have enough water to supply our cities and fill our reservoirs.
But did you know that North Carolina's rivers flow in 17 ancient drainage basins that are separate and distinct from each other?
Each basin is like a living organism with its own circulatory system. And like a living organism, its health is subject to change. And that's why we all need to know Basin Basics.
I went to elementary school and high school in Thomasville, North Carolina, in the Piedmont. I knew Abbott's Creek and the Watery River, but I didn't know I lived in the Yadkin River Basin. I spent much time with my family in my early years in the Upper Hickory Nut Gorge, east of Asheville. I fished many trout streams in the area, but didn't know the river basins into which they flowed. I caught my first striped bass and shad in the Roanoke River when I was a teenager, but I didn't know the Roanoke was an important river basin. In my early years, I knew that an invisible line runs through the Appalachians, known as the Eastern Continental Divide. In theory, if you pour water on the Continental Divide, one half goes into the Gulf of Mexico, and the other half into the Atlantic. North Carolina students are now basin savvy like never before. They know that river basins do not respect state boundary lines. Of our 17 basins, most straddled the borders of surrounding states. A few, however, like the Neuse, Tar, and Cape Fear, lie entirely within North Carolina's borders. Today, there are signs all around us, telling us whether we are entering or leaving a river basin. Storm drains let us know where surface waters will flow.
Why are we making such a big deal about river basins? And how do they affect our lives?
To find out how cities and the state of North Carolina regulate river basins, I went to two good friends, Dale Crisp, Public Utilities Director for the City of Raleigh, and Dan McClawhorn, an attorney for the City of Raleigh who is one of the best environmental lawyers I have ever known.
Folks tend to identify the area, the community that they live in by the county, the city, this subdivision. And over the past 5 to 10 years, the folks at the Diener Department of Environment and Natural Resources have done just a wonderful job of educating all the citizens in North Carolina of the river basins that they live in. They've done that by placing informational signs along the major highways indicating once you're leaving a certain river basin and entering into another. All the activities that we conduct in our everyday lives have an impact on the water quality within that river basin. So therefore it's important for folks to think in terms of river basin community.
I was surprised to learn from Dan McClawhorn that North Carolina was one of the first states to use river basins as planning units.
In the late 1980s, North Carolina's Department of Environment and Natural Resources recognized the importance of basin planning and actually went to basin planning, I think, as the first state in the country to use this as a device in making its water quality decisions. Part of that, of course, was making our population aware of the consequences of their own activities within a basin. So as I sit here in Wake County, 150 miles from Oriental, North Carolina, which is at the other end of the Neuse River, then I ought to think about how the fertilizer on my lawn affects the water quality when I get to the coast. When I walk by a storm drain and decide, do I throw the cup down the storm drain or do I take it over to a trash receptacle? Actually, there's a little placard that's been stenciled on many of those storm drains that says, leads to the Neuse River. So it makes me think about water quality at the Neuse River Those are our educational tools. Those basin signs alert you you've come into a basin, and you might think about where that basin leads. And then those smaller signs inside the metropolitan areas alert you that you could change your habits and improve the quality of the water that you will swim in when you get to the coast. River basins for cities and counties are a critical element in making any of their planning decisions, as well as looking at how they will make their investments. River basins will determine where they can take water for use in drinking population. They'll also be very important to where they can discharge that wastewater. Equally important to cities and counties are how their citizens can use that recreational resource and how they protect that recreational resource for fishing, for boating, and for other activities that people enjoy in the rivers.
One of the major issues dealt with in North Carolina's basin planning laws is the issue of interbasin transfer, which was defined for me by Dale Crisp.
There are 17 major river basins across North Carolina, and interbasin transfer is defined in the law as moving water from one river basin to another. An example of that would be water that's removed from the Neuse River Basin, transferred to another river basin by a set of pumps and pipes in a conveyance system and discharged directly into the other river basin.
Dan described perhaps the best example of an interbasin transfer controversy in North Carolina history.
A part of this basin planning that's become new to our law in North Carolina since 1993 is the interbasin transfer concept. The controversy that we had that was created when Virginia Beach asked to start taking 90 million gallons a day of water out of the Roanoke River system and transporting it across two river basins to Virginia Beach really brought that issue to the forefront in North Carolina. We passed legislation in 1993 for the first time dealing with interbasin transfers. It was amended in 1998. It was amended again in 2007. It's an issue of incredibly high importance as we are confronted by the drought, making all of us aware of our scarce water resources and our greatly building population.
But what about North Carolina communities that lie across more than one river basin?
When North Carolina was laying out its counties and its cities were being created, river basins were something that no one was paying attention to. They just existed and people didn't think about them as a planning element. When they were added to that planning mix, then the difficulties that sometimes are confronted by cities that are in two basins became apparent. Durham is a great example here in the Triangle area. Durham is both in the Neuse Basin and in the Cape Fear Basin. It takes a lot of its drinking water, nearly all of it, out of the Neuse Basin, but it discharges most of its wastewater into the Cape Fear Basin.
Because interbasin transfer is now subject to numerous restrictions, water managers are challenged more than ever before in North Carolina's thirsty, growing cities.
Each river basin within North Carolina does have a finite amount of water resources available to it, and the interbasin transfer laws prohibit the movement of more than 2 million gallons of water a day between river basins. You can, under certain conditions, get approval to move more than that, but generally water supply systems consider moving water from one river basin to another very difficult. Our technology has grown to the point, though, where many communities are starting to reuse the water more than once that they withdraw for making potable drinking water. And I think we'll continue to apply that technology in order to be able to sustain the growth that we're seeing in North Carolina.
City planners look at river basins as water sources, but biologists see basins as vibrant living organisms. Few people know more about the biological uniqueness of each of North Carolina's river basins than Wayne Starnes and Arthur Bogan of the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Wayne Starnes describes our river basins in a unique way, as crucibles of evolution.
Well, each river basin has a a long and separate history from its neighbors, and given that, there are always going to be species that evolve in isolation from their relatives in other river basins. And over time, each one of those drainage basins becomes a sort of separate crucible of evolution. Let's say we're talking about fish. There are lots of interdependent species that co-evolve together over years that are dependent on each other for reproduction and as food sources.
Wayne Starnes explained to me that as we travel across North Carolina, only a few miles in distance, and change altitude by only a few feet, we will encounter distinct fish species that took several million years to evolve. Crucible is a good term to describe our basins. I was astounded to learn the number of fish species that are found in North Carolina waters.
Well, North Carolina has well over 200 fish species, and really what makes that possible is the fact that they're divided into different drainage basins. The underlying geology of a given area drives the kind of habitat that are available to fish.
On Exploring North Carolina, we have only shown you a couple of dozen fish species. So it is difficult for me to imagine well over 200 freshwater species in our state. Some of our least seen and known fish include several species of shiners, dace, and darters. Wayne's colleague Art Bogan works with freshwater shellfish, creatures that co-evolved with finfish in our river basins.
In North Carolina, we have about 65 species of freshwater mussels and an additional 20 species of fingernail clams and about 55 species of freshwater snails that are found throughout the state. In North Carolina, snails and clams are not distributed just randomly as one might expect, but they're usually distributed by river basin. If you're in the Tennessee River Basin, you have a different suite of species than in the New River Basin, and both of those are different from what you find on the Atlantic Slope species. The distribution may be restricted to a river system like the Tar or the Neuse, or only found in the Cape Fear. A little appreciated fact about freshwater mussels, freshwater snails, is how long do they live? Freshwater snails may live up to 15 years, or in freshwater mussels, 10 years to 60 or 80 years. The eastern elliptio probably living 60 years on average.
Art Bogan explained that many freshwater mussels rely on a parasitic relationship for their survival with finfish that live in rivers, such as various shiners and sunfish. Eggs from mussels must attach to the gills of a host fish species or they die. After 2 weeks of development on a fish's gills, tiny mussels fall off the host fish and continue to grow in their natal river. Their home basin may be the only river basin in which they are found. So why should we care about these primitive shellfish in our rivers?
So what do freshwater mussels do? Most people think of them, if they're aware of them, of a pet rock. They just sit there, and they've been likened to the canary in the coal mine. They're a very good indicator of water quality. The important question that always comes up is, this is apparently an insignificant, obscure group to most people. Many people have never heard of freshwater mussels. What do they do for me? Why should I be concerned about whether another species goes extinct? Freshwater mussels are Mother Nature's filtering system. You like fresh water, you like clean water, you like to swim in the rivers, you like to fish. These are Mother Nature's filtering system, and they're also part of the food chain. They provide food for ducks, otters, muskrats, raccoons, fish, turtles, but more importantly, they're an important part of the ecosystem. How long can we take another species out without the whole aquatic ecosystem collapsing? Alternately, these animals apparently do not get cancer. What are they doing different? Are they a test organism for finding a new cure for cancer? There's a whole host of questions that can be asked of these animals.
We know that freshwater shellfish are dependent on their finfish host. When we introduce change into a river basin, the results can be dramatic and negative. Wayne Starnes explains that change can come in the form of alien species, reduced in-stream flows, sedimentation pollution, and dams.
Well, when you introduce an alien species into a river basin ecosystem, it's almost certainly going to upset the balance if it survives. In many cases, alien species die out right away. They don't become established. But those that do are almost always a problem. They become invasive and they can impact the local fauna by outcompeting one or two species. Well, reduced in-stream flows can have a variety of effects, and some of the more serious ones obviously are the dewatering of areas that are critical for spawning or feeding for a given fish species. Another thing that happens are increasing water temperatures above the tolerances of these animals. Well, sedimentation is doubtless one of our most serious problems when it comes to water quality. When silt enters the system, it settles out in areas of reduced flow, and in so doing, it basically buries and smothers the invertebrate fauna on which fishes depend for their food. Well, one of the principal effects that dams have is that it changes a riverine environment to a static standing water environment. And those species that have evolved for millions of years to live in riverine environments simply won't tolerate that.
We've seen some of the river basin issues facing our cities and state, and the importance of basins in the tapestry of biodiversity. What can we do, however, as individuals that will make a difference regarding the health and quality of water in our basins? Dave Toms, basin planner for the Division of Water Quality in Diener, had some suggestions.
When you're moving from basin to basin and you see those signs on the highway, we're really trying to emphasize and remind everyone that the basin is not just the rivers that run through it. It's not like Las Vegas where what happens here stays here. In a river basin, in a landscape sense, what happens in your own property has an effect downstream every single time. So as you see those signs, take a moment to reflect on how you maintain your own lawn and private property. Do you maintain healthy stream buffers with trees and shrubs? Do you choose to landscape your house in the most environmentally responsible way? Buffers are probably the cheapest and most effective way to naturally treat stormwater. As rainwater, stormwater moves through a buffer, the plant roots, the tree roots, the bacteria in the soil work to break down the contaminants, and additionally it slows down rainwater, and that prevents flooding and washouts and bank scouring that can happen after a big rainstorm. The best type of buffer is going to be a wide buffer, at least 50 up to 200 feet would be ideal. In a mix of vegetation, tall woody trees, short shrubs, a well-established undergrowth, not just grass. The ideal buffer will both treat the contaminants and help hold the stream bank in place and prevent erosion.
As droughts come and go in North Carolina, you will probably hear the argument, I'm using well water, so I don't have to worry about city or county regulations. I asked Dave Toms about this commonly used excuse.
It's easy to think of groundwater and surface water as separate sources, but in fact they are intimately connected. In a drought period, groundwater is what provides most of the flow in a stream. It's not rainwater. So for someone who's thinking about using well water to irrigate a lawn, that's an environmentally sensitive and potentially irresponsible decision, because as you lower the groundwater tables, you further lower the amount of water in a stream and impact the biological community within it. DENR is tasked to preserve, protect, and enhance the natural resources of the state in an environmentally and economically sound manner. And we do that with a two-pronged approach, a strong education, communication, outreach side of the division, and then we have a regulatory and enforcement side of the department, which includes sediment and erosion control, stormwater, water quality, water supply. But despite all the many programs that we use to regulate, we really rely on the individual making personal decisions on their own property, in their yard, in their field, and in pasture, because that's where you get the most bang for the buck, when people make environmentally sound decisions at home.
Now that you know Basin Basics, I hope the signs along our highways will have new meaning as you explore North Carolina.
For additional information about this or other episodes, go to these websites. This permanent digital record of North Carolina's natural heritage will be used in schools and the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences for generations to come, because of the generous financial support of the members of State Employees Credit Union. Exploring North Carolina is produced in partnership with the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, the largest natural sciences museum in the Southeast. Let it be your field guide to the treasures of North Carolina and beyond. And by UNC TV viewers like you. Episodes of Exploring North Carolina are made available to public schools across North Carolina through the generosity of the William R. Keenan Jr. Charitable Trust.